welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is Justice for All, where you get to hear from legal professionals in the surrounding area. I'm Rebecca Berger, and we have an amazing guest tonight, Melissa Rosenblum from the law offices of Melissa Rosenblum. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So, having your own law practice in this time when there's been so much change in the law, that's got to be difficult.
Well, you know, the last 18 months was, I would say, I don't know if challenging is the right word. I think that I was fortunate that my business was established before our crazy last 18 months. And you can't talk today without talking about COVID and the way
it really, because I think it's changed. I think it's changed the landscape of how we practice at this point, and we're still trying to figure out what's it going to look like.
Exactly. Change the way we practice, the way we interact with clients, the way we handle court appearance. And as you know, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was in court every day, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't. And so I will say initially when everything shut down, there was like almost like a weight lifted that I thought, oh, I could catch up on everything.
Yeah.
And it was really nice for a few weeks. And then it was are we going to return back to regular business? But I will say I was fortunate that for me, and I am a small firm, it's me and I have two full-time employees. My business really, other than that first March and April of COVID, really luckily resumed back to what it was. I think that when people need a criminal attorney, they need a criminal attorney.
Exactly. Well, you handle everything from municipal court matters up to, indictable superior court matters.
Correct. So what I tell people is I handle anything from a traffic ticket to a homicide and everything in between. and just to put things in perspective to people. I also handle domestic violence cases in family court, but as you know, that's connected to criminal because there are, criminal allegations with it.
You have restraining orders,
and
then sometimes there's criminal charges along with it.
Yes.
So you're doing the final restraining order hearings as well as the criminal charges that may have followed.
Exactly. And so I think that over the changes, there have been, at least in the legal community, some positive. I think the realization that municipal court can be handled via Zoom is actually a wonderful transition for attorneys that are in, some days I'm in 5 different municipal courts, and it is
difficult.
I jokingly say I'm double fisting I have 2 computers.
computers.
And I'm like going back and forth, but as stressful as that is, it's so much nicer than, driving to 5 different courts.
Because you're always coordinating.
Yes.
You're always trying to coordinate that schedule and say, okay, I'll be here, but I'll be there. You're calling courts, can I have a ready hold so that you're able to appear? Yes.
And so with the Zoom, it's still the same idea, but you're at your desk doing it, and it's just a little easier. And I think the realization is that municipal court, for the most part, traffic tickets that are usually, 99% of cases are resolved with some sort of plea.
Yes.
And so I think that's been the positive of realizing that it can be done this way. It's actually more efficient, and the prosecutors who are on top of their lists and are looking at their lists ahead of time now, might be the first time they're doing that, but I have so many prosecutors that I can text or email, and we get the matters resolved before I even log into court. And prior to that,
which is helpful because it's even more efficient so that people aren't, part of the problem is when you're appearing in 5 different municipal courts, people are getting charged for you're appearing in, you're driving here, you're waiting, people are waiting in line to speak to the prosecutor.
And so many people will say, like, well, what's going to happen, like, what's the offer before court prior to that? And I would say, like, I don't know until I talk to the prosecutor, which won't happen until I'm in court.
Yes.
And now there's this idea that prosecutors are looking at their cases before court and making offers and resolving the case so that I can talk to my clients before court and they're not wringing their hands. And the truth is, with municipal court, which handles traffic tickets, and in New Jersey we call them disorderly persons offenses like simple assaults or harassment, most people have never been involved in the criminal justice system, and it is so stressful for them. And this is a way that I can talk to them before court, and then I say to them, we're going to appear via Zoom, and I'm going to do most of the talking. The judge will ask you a few questions, and it's less stressful for them. It really is a less... I know you were a trial attorney and you've been in court, and for me, being in court isn't stressful, but I am cognizant of the fact that for my clients,
It is.
a speeding ticket can it really does weigh on them in a way
Well,
that
being in a courtroom, I think, can be intimidating.
oh yes, yeah, it is an overwhelming experience.
So what do you think about, because right now the court, the administrative office of the court is trying to figure out where do we go from here, right? In terms of we're trying to get feedback from all the attorneys. How do you feel about the idea of trials being Zoom? Have you had to be in that position?
So I've been asked this question, and I've been on committees that are addressing it, and there are certain trials that could be, but as a criminal defense attorney, I would say absolutely not.
Need to
A
be in person.
defendant, my client has a right to be in a courtroom. The Sixth Amendment, the right to cross-examine, the right to confront. The truth is, when people are on Zoom, you don't know if they're being coached. You don't know if they're alone. Credibility is always such an issue at trial. You can't gauge credibility.
Well, you can't watch people's actions either.
You can't. And I don't even like picking a jury via Zoom. And they're trying, so I think every county has tweaked it their own way. I have not had a jury trial yet or picked a jury via Zoom, but
They're just starting this
they're
whole
really
process.
just starting. But where I am in Atlantic County, we did have the first one in the state that picked and went to verdict, and that was months ago. And I believe there's one going on right now, and they're trying to kind of vet the jury prior to bringing them in, and then doing the last seating face-to-face of voir dire. And I just think, when you pick a jury, and this is what you can't explain to people, sometimes you get a feeling. And it could be a good feeling or a bad feeling, and there's no reason, there's no logical reason to explain it.
But you can't explain it unless you're picking that jury and you're sitting there. You're trying to get a feel. It's sometimes in the way they answer questions. Their action, the way
they're sitting, their
spitting.
body language. It could be a book that they have in their hand, which might not mean anything. But
it's also those sidebars. When you're sidebarring, the judge is asking questions, and then maybe you have to go and speak to the judge privately with the attorneys and that individual person. And sometimes the things that come out, you're like, oh, we have a problem.
So I think with representing clients accused of crimes, and serious crimes at that, I am protecting their life and their freedom and their liberty, and I think that we can't make exceptions for that. We can't say oh, this is good enough. Maybe, I know in other areas of law, people feel like with motions or with certain hearings, doing it via Zoom is fine. And maybe that's the case even in criminal. I think there's lots of parts of criminal court. I think arraignments can be done via Zoom. I think status listings can be done via Zoom.
But a motion to suppress.
No.
That's I think that that's an issue of you need to be in person. That's a credibility issue.
It's a cross-examination issue. It's a right to confront the witness issue. There's just, and so, I'm in this in-between of believing that these jury trials have to resume and they have to be in person. I do think you can get the jury down. There are people that when they obtain their jury summons, they are going to go and disqualify themselves for some reason.
Well, and don't you always get the question that's asked, well, What if they don't want to sit on the jury? My theory when I was doing jury trials is like, if you don't want to sit, I don't want you on my jury anyway, because you're not going to be paying attention.
And I think it depends on what vicinage and county you're in. I think in my vicinage, many of the judges, if someone is making excuses,
they just pick up on it. A lot of judges do.
They
I
just
agree with
dismiss
that.
them for that same idea. Like, if you don't want to be here, we don't want you falling asleep. We don't want you ignoring.
I've seen a lot of judges doing the same thing.
So they do vet, well, it's the beginning of voir dire, those potential jurors. And usually the people that come in and are face-to-face at the end are people that have been, they haven't been dismissed for cause.
Okay.
And so it's just the preemptive strikes that are left. And, I think that works to a certain extent. As I said,
Do you get concerned sometimes, though, about, again, that feeling, having them live? Sometimes it's maybe even their body language with other people as they're sitting in the jury box.
How about how they're looking at the prosecutor
how they're
and the
looking at your
defense
client.
attorney and
Agreed.
the client?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you just get that. But I also have had clients sitting in custody for 18 months.
Yeah.
And, I have a client that is charged with attempted murder right now, and I believe in my heart of hearts he's not guilty. 18 months he's been sitting, and the case really hasn't moved, and I've filed motions to have him released, and it's heartbreaking. And I've talked about this case a lot because it's one of those that, like, I don't understand, and I've been doing this almost 25 years. And when I say I don't understand, I get upset. My investigator, who's a former state trooper, interviewed the victim of the shooting, and it was a shooting. And he said, I know the defendant. We went to high school together about 6 years ago. He was not one of the shooters. I have a signed affidavit.
What, did they consider it at all? Or?
They haven't done anything with it. They haven't re-met.
And do you think it's because they know there's no pressure that it's going to move forward to trial?
I do. They have never, 18 months they had that certification affidavit. I know the defendant. He was not one of the shooters. I did not know either of the shooters. Nobody's forcing me. They've never questioned him. They never asked for an ID. They've never done a lineup. They've never asked him if he knew or had any connection with either of the shooters. And I know that they don't want to do it because it'll hurt their case. But I'm also, at this point, saying to them, what are you doing? How do you prove your case? Tell me, when the victim gets on the stand and says that.
What are we doing?
And I sometimes believe that the state will say, like, if he's got 18 months in or 2 years in, that the defendant will eventually plead. And I think it's like an awful, like, unjust. So that case has been a case that has languished because of COVID. And this is a client that's remained in custody.
And it's got to be difficult to know if you believe your client's innocent to be sitting there. And I want to talk a little bit more about that after the commercial break.
Okay.
This is Justice for All. I'm Rebecca Berger. We'll be right back after the commercial break.
your strengths are made more evident as the times get harder. When the road gets bumpy, and it does, and sometimes they're big bumps, sometimes they're small bumps, we go that extra mile. We take them through the process, we put our heart and soul into it, and we do everything we can to help people obtain their dream. Helping people start lives, create lives in this area, it's a real pleasure, it's a real joy, and that keeps me doing what I'm doing.
Welcome back. This is Justice for All. I'm Rebecca Berger. We're talking to Melissa Rosenblum. Melissa, before we went to commercial break, we were talking about the hardship some of your clients are having during this pandemic, in the sense that, you know, we've had this issue of jury trials kind of at a halt, which on a normal, a normal time would be regular trials on a regular basis.
Right.
But it's really affected how we're doing. I mean, they're just starting these jury trials again, and it's really affected your clients.
It has, because as you know, that New Jersey doesn't have a bail system anymore. And the benefit of that is that you're not stuck in jail if you're poor or indigent or, don't have the funds, and that's all good. But instead of bail, we have criminal justice reform, and the judge decides whether to hold a defendant or to release them, and part of that decision making is the nature of the charge. And so there are certain charges, even someone with no prior record or limited contact, like attempted murder, like first-degree sexual assaults, and they're charges that sound awful, but even someone with no prior record, the judge might decide to detain because the charges are so serious. And so they deem the person a risk to the community. And they're just sitting. They're going to sit in custody until their trial comes. And so this no jury trials has been a huge issue for defendants.
So have you ever had the ability to, maybe you're having this situation and one of your clients is stuck, have you had a situation where you've been able to convince the state, like, hey, we need to get this person out because there's an issue?
I have not ever been able to convince the state. I have convinced many judges to release clients, and I have had many clients released during this time, partly for medical issues, partly because, the state isn't proceeding, or there's been this, stalling of the process. But I can't get all my clients out. And there's always a client that, for whatever reason is either the charge is serious, or they do have a bad prior record, or for whatever reason that has been sitting. And I give the example of the client that I have that's charged with attempted murder, who actually has very limited contact with the criminal justice system, but the charge is attempted murder. And the truth is that no judge wants to be responsible in the sense of letting, there's that concern. And I do understand that the charge is serious, but at this point, I'm really of the mindset of, like, let's put it on the trial list. I'm ready to go, and let's move it along. And I've said to the state, what happens? How do you prove the case when the alleged victim, and this is a victim, he was shot, it's sad, says, I know the defendant, it's not the defendant. Like, where do you go from there, And so that's the frustrating thing.
Were there other defendants involved in the case?
There were 2 alleged shooters. They only arrested my client. And I candidly have said, like, it appears like his car might have been utilized, but they don't know who was driving his car. They don't, there's, no identification made. There's like a lot of reasonable doubt. But I do think, and I've said this, is that the state knows that these individuals aren't getting released. And it's their chip. It's a bargaining chip for them. And I always say this, and I've been a defense attorney for 24 years. I started at the public defender's office in Philly. I've always done criminal defense. That I think if you are a prosecutor and you've never really met a defendant or talked to a defendant or see the defendant as anything more than a file name, they're not people in your mind. And I think that's what they forget, is that my client is somebody's son, brother, father, and he had a life, he had a job, he had, he is someone that if you met just generally at a bar or at a restaurant, you would like. And they don't have that experience or that training. I think they have files, and they just look at the files, and they forget that those files are actually people with lives.
And I think that that's an important point is, one of the things when I was a prosecutor was, what's going on with this person? What's going on with this set of facts? Because I always think it's dangerous if you paint a broad brush with anyone, because you can't just say, well, it looks like this. What's going on here? And you have to kind of evaluate all of that when you're looking at these cases.
Right, and as a prosecutor, the best case you have is that file. It doesn't get better than that. And not everything in that file
is helpful.
And not all of it goes to the jury.
No.
That's the other thing. So even though you might, have information, the question is that information that's going to get in at trial, that you can prove your case with?
Because you have the rules of court, you have the rules of evidence.
Yes. But I always say, the file is the best case. It has everything in it that you need. You might not be able to use all of it. But, I think, the most prosecutor offices, and there's lots in the state. I work all over the state of New Jersey.
So do you have you're not limited to one area, it's pretty much?
I mean, my office is in Atlantic County, and so Atlantic County and Cape May, the vicinage is one set of judges, and so I would say my main focus is there, but I appear in Cumberland, Gloucester, Burlington, sometimes Camden. I'm not limited to exactly where my office is. But there's young attorneys at the prosecutor's office. It's a wonderful training ground. I mean, I tell young attorneys to go to the public defender's office or the prosecutor's office to learn how to become a trial attorney.
What made you want to be a trial attorney?
Well, I think there's a few things. There's one that I was probably a pretty strong, young woman who expressed their opinion. And I think, at the time that I was growing up, if you were those things, people said you should be an attorney, right? I also had an aunt that I used to visit in Dallas, Texas, every winter break, and she was a criminal defense attorney. She was a federal criminal defense attorney, did white-collar crime. And she was just so dynamic. She is so dynamic and smart and articulate and just all these amazing qualities. And so I think between those two facts of people saying, oh, you would be
an amazing attorney. Yeah, that's what you should do.
That's what you should do, versus having a mentor who was a woman who, was strong and powerful, and also just so many wonderful qualities that I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be.
So did you come out of law school and you immediately went to the public defender's office?
I came out of law school and I started at the public defender's. I graduated in '97, and I was in the spring class of the public defender's office in Philly in April. And so they only hire for September, and sometimes they hire in the spring. And they have a very intense training program in Philly where you're training in a classroom setting for 3 weeks before you get even into court. And then you're only handling preliminary hearings, which are probable cause hearings in Philadelphia. You might be there for 3 to 6 months. You're there for about 2 years before you get your first jury trial. I mean, it is an amazing training experience. You learn how to be a trial attorney there. So I did know I wanted criminal law. When I went to law school, that was my focus. I actually interviewed at the Camden County Prosecutor's Office and the Philadelphia Public Defender's Office, and both opportunities were offered at the same time.
So what made you choose one over the other?
I just think everyone always said, oh, you're so criminal defense. You are, so, and as respected as the Camden County office was, I think the Philadelphia Public Defender's Office is, just I think that was my dream job when I was in law school. So the fact that it came to fruition, it just, I could not turn it down.
Well, it just sounds like criminal defense has been in your blood and certainly been your career for the past 24 years. If someone wanted to contact you to retain your services and speak with you, how would they do that?
Well, there are lots of different ways. So the law office is just Law Offices of Melissa Rosenblum. If you Google that, if you write Melissa Rosenblum, Melissa in Atlantic City, it comes up. I am the only Melissa, for some reason, attorney in Atlantic County area. I'm also on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. I try to make myself as easily accessible. My law firm, the easiest way is just to call the office. Should I say the number?
You can say the number.
609-904-6262. And we have someone answering the phones 24 hours, so we are always available.
Which is really important in this area of law.
It is, because sometimes when things happen, and usually it always happens after 12, nothing good happens after midnight, is at least what I tell my children. So yes, so we're available 24/7.
Well, I want to thank you. It's been so great having you as a guest and so interesting to hear your perspective and your experience in this field.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. This was really nice.
This is Justice for All. I'm Rebecca Berger, and we'll see you back next week.